From the viewport of the Vlaxian cruiser, the cautious venture, Earth appeared deceptively serene. A gentle blue sphere dotted with clouds and green landmasses, it projected an aura of harmlessness. Chief Observation Officer Flebo Gar, a slender pink-skinned alien with keen eyes, peered at his sensor readings with a skeptical squint. He couldn't reconcile the peaceful image with the planet's ominous reputation. He voiced his doubts to Captain Ril Kezar, questioning if they had the correct coordinates. He expected a more menacing vista for a world known for its dangerous inhabitants. Captain Kezar, with his 3 eyes, leaned over Flebo's shoulder, his weight seeming to challenge the screen's accuracy. He reminded Flebo of the High Command's long-standing interest in this seemingly insignificant planet and the human's unique potential, echoing the Zyra 7 Council's briefing with a touch of sarcasm. He expressed his reluctance to risk his fragile knees on what he considered a third-rate, uncharted backwater, fearing the planet's gravity might dislocate them. Flebo offered a more optimistic perspective, adjusting the ship's audio to capture the ambient sounds from Earth. The moment the audio connected, a jarring cacophony of shouts and thunderous applause filled the bridge. Flebo recoiled, his sensitive ears overwhelmed. The sounds coalesced into a chorus of voices chanting rhythmically. Captain Kezar, startled, leaned closer to discern the source of the human enthusiasm. The main screen displayed a large field teeming with humans in green and brown camouflage attire. Hundreds were clustered around a makeshift ring, where 2 individuals appeared ready to engage in some sort of physical contest. The translated subtitles identified the event as a basic combat training exhibition. Flebo expressed his confusion, wondering if this was some form of battle practice. Kezar shrugged, suggesting it was likely a harmless public sparring match, similar to how their younglings engaged in playful wrestling for motor skill development. At that moment, one of the human fighters unleashed a piercing yell and lunged at their opponent, delivering a powerful blow to the face that sent the other sprawling. The crowd erupted in a frenzy of cheers, whistles, and renewed chanting. Flebo, taken aback, commented on the intensity of the display. The screen flashed a notice labeling the event a showcase of basic combat skills. Captain Kezar's 3 eyes narrowed in disbelief. He questioned whether this was truly what humans considered normal. Flebo hesitated, suggesting a possible misinterpretation. He quickly accessed the comprehensive Earth database downloaded from the intergalactic repository, seeking information on human combat behavior. The data appeared instantly, displaying Earth-sampled combat data, average skills. Several video clips began to play, showcasing humans engaged in various forms of martial encounters, grappling, fist fights, kicking, and even a peculiar activity involving oversized gloves and rhythmic face jabs identified as boxing. Another video depicted a structured, intense hand-to-hand combat style labeled mixed martial arts. One clip, in particular, caught Kezar's attention, a young human executing a spinning kick that propelled their opponent several feet backward. He expressed his horror, questioning how the human species remained intact with such widespread aggression. He inquired about the frequency of these displays. Flebo confirmed the data's accuracy, stating this level of combat skill was categorized as average civilian capability, with more advanced skills reserved for military and law enforcement personnel. He added, with a gulp, that this display represented a substandard skill level. Captain Kezar's voice rose in disbelief. He questioned whether the data referred to an elite class. Flebo pointed to the screen, confirming that this level of skill was, in fact, commonplace. Kezar stood in stunned silence, absorbing the information. He voiced his unease to Flebo, expressing the unsettling nature of a civilization where such intense physical confrontation was considered a normal pastime, a spectator sport. Flebo pointed to the boisterous crowd below, emphasizing their evident enjoyment of the display. From the viewport of the Vlaxian cruiser, the cautious venture Earth presented a misleadingly tranquil image. A delicate blue sphere, speckled with clouds and green landmasses, it exuded an air of innocence. Chief Observation Officer Flebo Gar, a thin, pink-skinned alien with sharp eyes, scrutinized his sensor data with a doubtful frown. The placid picture clashed with the planet's menacing reputation. He voiced his concerns to Captain Ril Kezar, questioning the accuracy of their coordinates. He anticipated a more foreboding landscape for a world notorious for its perilous inhabitants. Captain Kezar, with his 3 eyes, leaned over Flebo's shoulder, his bulk seemingly a test for the screen's stability. He reminded Flebo of the High Command's long-held fascination with this seemingly unremarkable planet and the human's extraordinary capacity, mimicking the Zyra 7 Council's debriefing with a hint of derision. He expressed his unwillingness to endanger his delicate knees on what he deemed a mediocre, unexplored wilderness, worried that the planet's gravity could dislocate them. Flebo countered with a more hopeful outlook, modifying the ship's sound system to pick up ambient noise from Earth. The instant the connection was made, a jarring racket of yells and booming applause surged through the bridge speakers. Flebo flinched, his sensitive hearing overloaded. The noise merged into a chorus of voices chanting rhythmically. Captain Kezar, startled, leaned forward to make out the source of the human fervor. The main view screen revealed a wide field crammed with humans clad in green and brown camouflage gear. Hundreds were assembled around a temporary ring, where 2 figures seemed primed for some sort of physical encounter. The translated captions labeled the activity as a basic combat training demonstration. Flebo voiced his bewilderment, asking if it was some type of war exercise. Kezar shrugged, implying it was probably a benign public practice bout, analogous to how their young engaged in playful grappling to enhance motor skills. Just then, one of the human competitors emitted a piercing cry and dashed at the other, delivering a mighty blow to the face that knocked their rival to the ground. The spectators erupted in a flurry of cheers, whistles, and renewed chants. Flebo, astounded, remarked on the vehemence of the performance. The screen briefly displayed a message classifying the event as a showcase of fundamental combat techniques. Captain Kezar's 3 eyes narrowed in disbelief. He asked if this was genuinely what humans deemed typical. Flebo wavered, proposing a potential misinterpretation. He swiftly accessed the detailed Earth information archive obtained from the Intergalactic Data Center, researching human combat patterns. The information emerged instantly, showing Earth combat examples, average proficiency. A variety of video recordings commenced, showcasing humans participating in various forms of physical confrontations, wrestling, brawling, kicking, and even an unusual activity featuring oversized gloves and rhythmic facial strikes described as boxing. Another recording illustrated a structured, vigorous hand-to-hand combat style designated mixed martial arts. One segment, specifically, captured Kezar's eye, a young human performing a whirling kick that launched their opponent several feet away. He vocalized his dismay, wondering how the human race survived with such rampant pugnacity. He inquired about the prevalence of these events. Flebo validated the data's precision, clarifying that this level of fighting ability was classified as normal civilian competence, with more sophisticated capabilities restricted to military and law enforcement individuals. He added, with a nervous swallow, that this display represented a below-average skill level. Captain Kezar's voice rose with incredulity. He questioned if the data pertained to an elite group. Flebo indicated the screen, affirming that this degree of proficiency was, in reality, widespread. Kezar stood speechless for a moment, absorbing the knowledge. He conveyed his disquiet to Flebo, expressing the disturbing nature of a society where such forceful physical engagement was considered a regular hobby, a public spectacle. Flebo directed attention to the raucous crowd below, underscoring their apparent enthusiasm for the demonstration. Kezar, increasingly agitated, requested a scan for alternative cultural pursuits. Perhaps they would uncover something more refined: gardening, music, dance, activities that did not entail physical assault. However, the scan revealed only more combat-related data: wrestling competitions, simulated firearm practice ranges, a place called boot camp, and most alarmingly, a concept known as self-defense instruction. Flebo emitted a nervous chuckle. "Captain," he reported, "it appears they even educate their young in this martial lifestyle." Kezar's knees weakened reflexively. "They're young?" Flebo nodded gravely, observing a recording where a group of smaller humans, likely children, were acquiring blocking and punching techniques with alarming eagerness. I believe we might be drastically underestimating this species, Captain." "Underestimating is a gross understatement," Kezar retorted, his tone laced with apprehension. He watched the screen intently as another clip played, this one showing a human executing a series of fluid movements, knocking down multiple opponents in rapid succession with a grace that was as elegant as it was deadly. Captain Kezar, increasingly perturbed, ordered a scan for other cultural activities. He hoped to discover something less combative, perhaps artistic pursuits like gardening, music, or dance, activities that didn't involve physical violence. The scan, however, returned even more combat-oriented data, wrestling matches, simulated weapons ranges, a place called boot camp, and most disturbingly, a concept referred to as self-defense instruction. Flebo emitted a nervous chuckle. "Captain," he reported, "it seems they even teach their youngsters this martial lifestyle." Kezar's knees buckled involuntarily. "Their young ones?" Flebo nodded gravely, directing the captain's attention to a recording where a group of small humans, likely children, were learning blocking and punching techniques with disconcerting enthusiasm. I believe we may be drastically misjudging this species, Captain." "Misjudging is a severe understatement," Kezar retorted, his voice laced with trepidation. He watched the screen intently as another clip played, showcasing a human executing a series of graceful yet devastating movements, taking down multiple opponents in rapid succession with an elegance that was as captivating as it was lethal. Flebo recoiled slightly from the screen, as if to distance himself from the unnerving reality unfolding before him. "Captain," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "if this is average, what in the cosmos constitutes exceptional?" They exchanged a long, wordless look, their shared apprehension palpable as the screen continued to display examples of supposedly ordinary human combat skills. Flebo shook his head, his tentacles drooping slightly. "Captain," he began, "perhaps we're misinterpreting their terminology. I mean, maybe they're just exaggerating." A sudden roar from the crowd below, as one of the fighters executed a spectacular flip and kick combination, cut him short. Captain Kezar inhaled deeply, all three eyes narrowing. "Flebo, mark Earth as extremely hostile and proceed with extreme caution." Flebo hesitated. "But Captain, they haven't shown any aggression towards us." "Not yet," Kezar countered, his unease having only intensified since their initial observations. As the crew debated whether to abandon the mission, a new development arose, a large gathering of humans in a massive facility labeled Cage Warriors. The accompanying information described it as a public sporting event where average combat skills were displayed in a controlled environment. Cage Warriors? Flebo read the title with mounting apprehension. Are they attempting to contain these confrontations? Perhaps it's a form of controlled practice, like a quarantined area, Kezar speculated, though his voice wavered slightly. If the humans need to cage themselves just to practice, we may be observing a very specific subset of their population. They agreed to deploy a remote observation drone to gather more information. Flebo tapped at his console, initiating the drone's descent with a flick of his slender pink finger. Through the drone's video feed, the crew observed a dimly lit arena filled with cheering humans, their excitement palpable as two individuals stood within a metal cage. The screen flickered with data logs as the translator struggled to keep pace with the enthusiastic human commentary. Flebo recoiled slightly from the screen, as if to put some distance between himself and the unsettling display of human aggression. "Captain," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper, "if this represents their average capabilities, what in the universe could be considered exceptional?" The two aliens exchanged a long, silent look, the shared unease palpable as the screen continued its relentless showcase of supposedly ordinary human combat skills. Flebo shook his head, his tentacles drooping slightly. "Perhaps," he suggested, "we are misinterpreting their terminology. Maybe they're simply exaggerating." The sudden roar from the crowd below, as one of the fighters executed a spectacular flip and kick combination, abruptly ended his speculation. Captain Kezar inhaled deeply, all three eyes narrowing. "Flebo," he commanded, "designate Earth as extremely hostile and proceed with the utmost caution." Flebo hesitated. "But Captain, they haven't displayed any aggression towards us." "Not yet," Kezar countered, his anxiety having only amplified since their initial observations. As the crew debated whether to abandon their mission altogether, a new development caught their attention: a large congregation of humans within a massive facility labeled Cage Warriors. The accompanying data described it as a public sporting event where average combat skills were showcased in a controlled setting. Cage Warriors? Flebo read the title aloud, his apprehension mounting. Are they attempting to confine these altercations? It might be a form of regulated practice, a designated area, Kezar speculated, his voice wavering slightly. If the humans need to enclose themselves just to train, perhaps we are witnessing a particular subgroup of their population. They agreed to deploy a remote observation drone to gather more intelligence. Flebo tapped at his console, initiating the drone's descent with a touch of his slender pink finger. The drone's video feed revealed a dimly lit arena packed with cheering humans, their excitement palpable as two individuals stood within a metal cage. The screen flickered with data logs as the translator struggled to keep up with the enthusiastic human commentary. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cage Warriors," boomed an announcer, his voice reaching a fever pitch. The audience roared in response, their anticipation building as the first fighter strode into the ring. The two combatants appeared deceptively ordinary. No armor, no advanced weaponry, just thin gloves and focused expressions. The first fighter, a lean figure in shorts, flexed his muscles, eliciting cheers from the crowd. His opponent, a larger human with a shaved head, cracked his knuckles, projecting the unwavering confidence of someone well acquainted with the cage. Flebo's eyes darted nervously towards Captain Kezar. "Captain," he inquired, "shouldn't we intervene if things escalate?" "Absolutely not," Kezar snapped, his eye stalks flaring. "This is precisely what we're here to observe. And besides, if these are merely average combat skills, it's imperative we understand them." The two fighters circled each other, assessing their opponent with a predatory intensity that made Flebo's skin crawl. With a sudden burst of movement, the first fighter lunged, his fist connecting with a sickening crunch that echoed through the drone's audio feed. The crew flinched as the opponent stumbled, only to retaliate with a knee strike that sent the first fighter sprawling. "This is barbaric," Flebo whispered, his eyes wide. "Are they attempting to disable each other?" "According to the data feed, this is considered standard entertainment," Kezar replied, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his own unease. "Apparently, humans derive pleasure from witnessing these displays. It's a form of social bonding." Another exchange of blows followed, each impact more jarring than the last. Flebo's tentacles twitched nervously with each punch, his discomfort escalating as the two fighters locked into a grappling hold, straining with such force that their faces turned crimson. The screen provided a detailed breakdown of each move, categorizing them as strikes, submissions, or counterattacks. The level of technique displayed was astonishing, especially for a species whose pastimes supposedly included picnics, fishing, and gardening. "Captain," Flebo asked, his voice filled with bewilderment, "are these human soldiers? Warriors?" He glanced at his colleagues, who appeared equally perplexed. Kezar tapped a few buttons, scrolling through the available data. "According to this," he said, gesturing to the fighter profiles, "neither of them is a trained soldier. In fact, one works at something called a pizzeria, and the other is a pharmaceutical sales representative." "A pizza maker?" Flebo's voice cracked. "And they can fight like that?" Kezar cleared his throat, visibly struggling to comprehend the information. "Yes," he said, "it appears hand-to-hand combat is a recreational activity here, practiced by individuals with no formal military background." "Captain," Flebo whispered, his voice barely a murmur, "if this represents the average human's combat capabilities, what in the universe constitutes exceptional?" A long, silent exchange passed between the two aliens, the shared anxiety heavy in the air as the screen continued to display examples of supposedly ordinary human combat skills. Flebo shook his head, tentacles drooping slightly. "Captain, perhaps we're misinterpreting their terminology. Maybe it's just hyperbole." A sudden roar from the crowd below, punctuating a fighter's spectacular flip and kick combination, cut his words short. Captain Kezar inhaled deeply, all three eyes narrowing. "Flebo, designate Earth as extremely hostile. Proceed with extreme caution." Flebo hesitated. But Captain, they haven't demonstrated any hostility towards us. Not yet, Kezar countered, his apprehension having only grown since their initial observations. As the crew debated abandoning the mission, a new development emerged, a large gathering of humans in a massive facility labeled Cage Warriors. The accompanying data described a public sporting event showcasing average combat skills in a controlled setting. Cage Warriors? Flebo read aloud, his concern escalating. Are they attempting to contain these physical engagements? Perhaps it's a form of regulated practice, a designated area, Kezar speculated, a tremor in his voice. If humans need to enclose themselves just to train, perhaps we're observing a very particular subset of their population. They agreed to deploy a remote observation drone for more intel. Flebo tapped his console, initiating the drone's descent with a touch of his slender pink finger. The drone's video feed revealed a dimly lit arena teeming with cheering humans, their excitement palpable as two individuals stood within the metal cage. The screen flickered with data logs as the translator struggled to keep pace with the energetic commentary. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cage Warriors," a booming voice announced, reaching a fever pitch. The audience roared in response, anticipation building as the first fighter entered the cage. The two combatants appeared deceptively ordinary, no armor, no advanced weaponry, just thin gloves and focused expressions. The first, lean and wearing shorts, flexed, drawing cheers. His opponent, larger with a shaved head, cracked his knuckles, radiating the quiet confidence of someone familiar with the cage. Flebo's eyes darted nervously to Captain Kezar. "Captain," he inquired, "should we perhaps intervene if the situation escalates?" "Absolutely not," Kezar snapped, his eye stalks flaring. "This is precisely what we're here to observe. And if these are merely average combat skills, it's imperative we comprehend them." The two fighters circled, assessing each other with an intensity that made Flebo's skin crawl. Suddenly, the first fighter lunged, his fist connecting with a sickening thud that echoed through the drone's audio. The crew flinched as the opponent stumbled, retaliating with a knee strike that sent the first fighter sprawling. "This is savage," Flebo whispered, his eyes wide. "Are they trying to injure one another?" "According to the data, this is considered standard entertainment," Kezar replied, the tremor in his voice betraying his own unease. "Apparently, humans derive pleasure from witnessing these displays. It's a form of social interaction." Another exchange of blows followed, each impact more jarring than the last. Flebo's tentacles twitched with each punch, his discomfort growing as the two fighters locked into a grappling hold, straining with such force that their faces flushed. The screen displayed a detailed breakdown of each move, categorizing them as strikes, submissions, or counterattacks. The level of technique was astonishing, especially for a species supposedly fond of picnics, fishing, and gardening. "Captain," Flebo asked, bewildered, "are these human soldiers? Elite warriors?" He glanced at his colleagues, who appeared equally perplexed. Kezar tapped his console, scrolling through the data. "According to this," he said, indicating the fighter profiles, "neither is a trained soldier. One works at a pizzeria, and the other is a pharmaceutical sales representative." "A pizza chef?" Flebo's voice cracked. "And they can fight like this?" Kezar cleared his throat, struggling to comprehend. "Yes," he said, "it appears hand-to-hand combat is a recreational activity, practiced by individuals with no formal military experience." Just then, the larger fighter executed a brutal move, flipping his opponent onto the mat with a force that rattled the cage. The crowd roared, the cheers vibrating through the ship's speakers. Even the battle-hardened Captain Kezar winced. "This is excessive," Flebo muttered, wiping imaginary sweat from his brow. "I haven't witnessed anything this intense since the Valaxian Gladiator Games, and those were outlawed centuries ago." Just as Flebo's mind reeled from this revelation, the larger fighter executed a brutal maneuver, flipping his opponent onto the mat with a force that shook the cage. The crowd's roar reverberated through the ship's speakers, the raw enthusiasm enough to make even the battle-hardened Captain Kezar wince. "This is excessive," Flebo muttered, wiping imaginary perspiration from his brow. I haven't witnessed such intensity since the Valaxian gladiator games, which were outlawed centuries ago. Kezar gave a slow, cautious nod. There's something to this, he mused, staring at the humans on the screen, now exchanging a dizzying flurry of punches and kicks with frightening precision. These humans are far more adaptable than we anticipated. If even a pizza chef can exhibit this level of combat proficiency, what are they capable of with formal training? The fight concluded with the referee declaring the larger fighter the victor. The two combatants shook hands, bloody but grinning, seemingly pleased with the match. This final display of camaraderie perplexed the crew. "Captain, I thought they were adversaries," Flebo whispered. "Why are they acting like companions?" "Humans have peculiar customs, Flebo," the captain mumbled, trying to grasp the display. "Apparently, they partake in these brutal rituals for recreation, and then they celebrate together." An alert beeped on Flebo's console. The drone had detected a series of other combat-related activities nearby. The adjacent building seemed to host a variety of combat sessions, from small groups sparring in gyms to individuals striking massive bags with focused intensity. "Captain, this isn't an isolated incident," Flebo reported, a tremor in his voice. "It appears humans regularly engage in combat across a variety of venues. I'm detecting over 24 similar gatherings within a 2-mile radius." Kezar's 3 eyes narrowed. "Are you saying there are multiple combat zones in this city alone?" "Not just this city, Captain," Flebo corrected, scrolling through the data feed. "It appears to be widespread. I'm detecting similar gatherings in locations designated as gyms, dojo centers, and something called boot camps." Kezar's already pale skin took on a sickly hue. "Boot camps? Is that where they prepare their young?" Flebo checked the records, tapping the screen nervously. "It seems so. Boot camps are human training facilities where they instruct all age groups in combat skills, including younglings from the age of, 5. They begin learning basic techniques." A horrified silence fell over the bridge as each crew member tried to imagine a planet full of small humans training to become even more formidable. Flebo rubbed his temples, overwhelmed by the realization that humans seemed predisposed to conflict. Kezar finally broke the silence. "It's a wonder they haven't annihilated each other. And we're only scratching the surface of their capabilities." The captain reactivated the data feed, determined to extract any information that might explain why a supposedly civilized species would be so preoccupied with combat. But the more he read, the less sense it made. "It says here," Kezar muttered, reading aloud from the ship's report, "humans are driven to develop combat skills not just for defense, but also for recreation, physical fitness, and entertainment. Their combat-based sports are among the most popular in their culture." Flebo paled, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Captain, do you think that means they actually enjoy this?" Kezar grimaced. "It would appear so. And that means if we ever have to face them on a battlefield, we might be up against not just soldiers, but an entire civilization that thrives on adversity." He trailed off, too disturbed to complete his thought. As the final fight of the evening concluded, the drone captured footage of the humans laughing, cheering, and congratulating each other as they exited the Cage Warriors arena. Some limped, others nursed bruises, but every one of them looked exhilarated. Captain Kezar shook his head slowly, clearly unnerved. "Flebo, mark Earth in the Galactic Registry as high risk. Include a note about their unsettling enthusiasm for combat." Kezar slowly nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "There's something remarkable about this," he mused, his 3 eyes fixed on the humans displayed on the screen, now exchanging a bewildering flurry of punches and kicks with terrifying precision. "These humans are far more adaptable than we anticipated. If a pizza chef possesses this level of combat skill, imagine their capabilities with formal military training." The fight concluded with the referee announcing the larger fighter as the victor. The two combatants shook hands, blooded but grinning, seemingly content with the match. This final display of sportsmanship puzzled the crew. "Captain," Flebo whispered, "I thought they were adversaries. Why are they behaving like comrades?" "Humans have unusual social rituals," Flebo, the captain mumbled, still struggling to grasp the concept. Apparently, they participate in these brutal displays for recreation, then celebrate together afterward. Just then, an alert sounded on Flebo's console. The drone had detected numerous other combat-related events in the immediate vicinity. The surrounding buildings appeared to host a variety of combat practices, from small groups sparring in training facilities to individuals striking heavy bags with intense focus. "Captain, this isn't an isolated occurrence," Flebo reported, his voice trembling slightly. "It appears humans engage in combat regularly in a variety of settings. I'm detecting over 24 similar gatherings within a 2-mile radius." Kezar's 3 eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting there are multiple combat zones in this single city?" "Not just this city, Captain," Flebo corrected, navigating through the data feed. "It appears to be all-pervasive. I'm detecting similar activities in places designated as gyms, dojo centers, and something called boot camps." Kezar's already pale skin turned a sickly shade of green. "Boot camps? Is that where they condition their young?" Flebo consulted the data, nervously tapping the screen. "It seems so. Boot camps are human training centers where they instruct all age groups in combat techniques, including children as young as 5 years old. They begin by learning fundamental skills." A horrified silence descended upon the bridge as each crew member grappled with the image of a planet populated by small children training to become even more formidable fighters. Flebo massaged his temples, overwhelmed by the apparent human predisposition for physical confrontation. Kezar finally broke the silence. "It's astonishing they haven't wiped each other out. And we're only witnessing a fraction of their true potential." The captain reactivated the data stream, determined to uncover any information that might explain why a seemingly civilized species would be so obsessed with combat. However, the more he read, the more perplexing it became. According to this report, Kezar muttered, reading aloud from the ship's display, "Humans are motivated to develop combat skills not only for self-preservation, but also for leisure, physical conditioning, and amusement. Their combat-oriented sports are among the most popular forms of entertainment in their culture." Flebo's face paled, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Captain, do you believe they actually derive pleasure from this?" Kezar grimaced. "It would seem so. Which means that in any potential conflict, we wouldn't be facing just a trained military, but an entire civilization that thrives on physical confrontation." He trailed off, too unsettled to complete his thought. As the final match of the evening concluded, the drone captured footage of the humans laughing, cheering, and congratulating one another as they left the Cage Warriors arena. Some limped, others nursed bruises, but every one of them looked invigorated. Captain Kezar shook his head slowly, visibly unnerved. "Flebo, designate Earth in the Galactic Registry as high risk. Add a special notation regarding their disturbing enthusiasm for combat." Flebo, his hand trembling slightly, entered the designation, a chill running down his spine. While the humans celebrated their evening's entertainment, the crew of the Cautious Venture recognized a stark warning. As the initial shock of the Cage Warriors event subsided, the crew of the Cautious Venture took a collective breath, attempting to regain their composure. Captain Kezar, despite his rattled nerves, remained determined to gather more data. "Our mission isn't complete," he declared, though a hint of uncertainty lingered in his voice. "We need to understand the underlying reasons for this behavior. Is it a survival instinct, or perhaps some form of social bonding?" Chief Observation Officer Flebo nodded hesitantly, his initial enthusiasm considerably dampened. His tentacles twitched nervously as he typed on his data pad. "Humans are exceedingly complex, Captain. Perhaps they view fighting as a form of competitive sport." "Let's try direct observation," suggested Rix, the science officer, a wiry, lavender-hued alien with an unwavering dedication to scientific objectivity. Even so, her hands trembled slightly as she accessed the drone feed on her screen. "There are community centers throughout their cities. Perhaps we can observe ordinary citizens engaged in less aggressive activities." They scanned their data logs, searching for a suitable location, and found a promising candidate. A local gym, located just a few miles from the Cage Warriors arena, offered what was described as self-defense classes for civilians. Flebo activated the drone's navigation system, directing it towards the gym with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The gym, called Jab Junction, advertised itself as a great place to knock out stress. Promising, Kezar muttered. Surely a facility dedicated to stress reduction will offer something more tranquil. As the drone approached, however, it picked up the sounds of enthusiastic grunting and rhythmic clapping. The scene unfolding on the screen was not the calming yoga or stretching class they had hoped for. Inside Jab Junction, a row of humans of varying ages and sizes were furiously punching large bags with terrifying zeal, beads of sweat flying as they grunted with each impact. A muscular human in a tight-fitting shirt walked along the line, shouting words of encouragement. "Push it! You got this! Those bags won't know what hit them." Kezar's eye stalks narrowed. Is he inciting them to attack inanimate objects? It appears so, Captain, Rix whispered, swallowing hard. And look at this one, she pointed to a young human, likely in their early teens, who was jabbing at a bag with the focused intensity of a predator stalking its prey. They're training children here as well. Why would they subject youngsters to this? Flebo asked, his voice trembling. Is this considered enjoyable? As they watched, an instructor demonstrated a series of advanced moves, landing a combination of blows on a heavy bag before finishing with a powerful kick. The group of humans applauded, some whooping with admiration. The drone's translator picked up snippets of conversation. "Man, that was killer!" exclaimed one enthusiastic middle-aged man whose shirt proclaimed, "Pain is just weakness leaving the body." He wiped his brow, grinning, seemingly exhilarated by his exhaustion. "Feels amazing to get it all out," replied a woman beside him, punching the air for emphasis. "Nothing like a little physical release, am I right?" Rix blinked in disbelief. They're using combat as therapy? The gym's slogan, displayed prominently on a poster, Jab Junction, when life hits, hit back harder. Kezar rubbed his temples with a sigh. "Flebo, are you recording all of this?" "Yes, Captain. Though I'm beginning to suspect our data storage might be insufficient if we continue to document every unusual human activity." Flebo reviewed his observation log. According to human cultural files, this self-defense training is considered a common hobby, accessible to anyone regardless of age or profession. Meaning, Rix interrupted, that civilians could be as dangerous as their trained military personnel? It would seem so, Flebo muttered. Perhaps even more so, considering their enthusiasm. Kezar shook his head in disbelief, still struggling to process the information. "I simply don't understand. In what galaxy does a civilian population require this level of combat skill? And enjoy it?" Just then, the gym's front door opened, and an elderly human, well into his later years, walked in, carrying a small duffel bag and nodding to the instructor. The crew watched in stunned silence as the elderly human warmed up, shadow boxing with surprising agility. "He's elderly," Rix murmured, staring at the screen. Why would someone of that age participate in such strenuous physical activity? The instructor approached the older man, clapping him on the back. "All right, Earl, show these youngsters how it's done." Earl cracked his knuckles, then proceeded to launch into a flawless sequence of punches and kicks against a heavy bag. The crew's collective jaws dropped as the elderly man not only matched the vigor of his younger counterparts, but even surpassed some of them. Flebo, Rix, and Captain Kezar watched, wide-eyed, as he delivered a powerful blow that left the heavy bag swinging wildly. "Captain," Flebo whispered, his voice barely above a quiver, "if this is their elderly, what are their prime warriors capable of?" Before Kezar could respond, the drone's audio picked up Earl's voice mid-conversation. "Used to be a boxer back in the day," he was saying with a grin, wiping sweat from his brow. "Kept up the training to stay fit, you know. Keeps the old heart pumping." His younger gym companion, looking both impressed and slightly intimidated, asked, "Ever think about slowing down, Earl?" Earl laughed, slapping his friend on the back. "Slow down, son? In this world, if you don't keep moving, you get left behind." Captain Kezar shuddered, a new wave of alarm washing over him. The implications were becoming increasingly serious. Humans didn't just learn combat, they maintained it, kept it as a lifelong skill, treating it as both a personal challenge and a source of pride.